Viewers, of recent, several groups in the West and here in India have been flagging what they claim is the rising Hindu religious extremism. The state, according to these groups, has turned fascist and Hindus intolerant. In fact, even the cursory distinction between Hindutva and Hinduism, or those who are the proponents of Hindutva and Hindus, has been done away with. India's foreign minister has been forced to rebut after some foreign government representatives also began to lecture India on the allegedly plummeting state of minority religious rights in the country. Viewers, cast your eyes on what is being said. Whether it is the USCIRF, which is a State Department panel of the United States, or viewers, it is the United States government's own spokespeople, or magazines, newspapers in the West, increasingly on one side of the divide, and I'm talking about the political divide, viewers. Let me be more specific, the left of center. And here in India, of course, a whole group of sundry rights lobbies, etc., have been pillaring the government, especially under Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the center, accusing him of wanting to create the architecture for a long and lasting Hindu Rashtra. How true are these accusations? These letters that are written by bureaucrats, the politicians, and of course some Western governments. How true are their summations, their surmises? Let's open this up this evening to some honest questioning and hopefully also some informed answers. Let me begin first with Mr. Amit Malviya. Mr. Malviya, you know what I'm talking about. The US Commission for International Religious Freedom recently capped the criticism that has been building, especially around also the Ram Navami violence that we have seen the country convulsed by in at least 10 states. How do you react to this?
Rahul, first of all, I don't think it's anyone's business to tell India how to conduct its polity and how to go about governance. And then we see a bunch of these busybodies who are ably assisted by their counterparts here in India, who seem to suggest that everything in India is falling apart when it is anything but the truth. There's also a lot of selectivism. The bodies in the US which want to patronize and lecture us probably do not realize that there is a rot right there in their backyard. But back here in India, there are a lot of people who seem to give a lot of credibility to reports that emanate from the West. There are organizations like the Amnesties and several other NGOs which receive a lot of hot money in the country for purposes of conversion, for purposes of fomenting trouble, and dividing the society or creating a wider rift in what already exists there. So there is a huge lobby out there which wants to see a weakened India. It plays on the divisions that we have. It has on its payroll people from Lutyens Delhi who continuously build the agenda that they want built for them for a largely Western audience. And on stake is a lot of dollars that these activists get here. But much has changed in the last 7 years. India today is not a country that is seeking endorsement from the West or these busybody activists and NGOs, or for that matter, institutions who claim to be holding the morality of the world. We are very clear about where we stand as a country, as a polity, as a society. We are clear about the fact that if any country has the moral authority to speak on treating people fairly and equally, then it is India. It is our hard belief and it is our dharmic values which instill in us this sense of fair play. And therefore, given the geopolitical reality, given how significant India is today in the world order, the large market potential that we represent for the world, and of course, India's markets, which are of course quite exciting option for the people, we are in a position to tell the world that we have view on their view on us, and we also have a view on what's happening in their country. It's perhaps time to tell the world that we are equals, treat us as one, and we are not going to be held hostage to the kind of narrative that you wish to impose on us, guilt trip us, and extract, things that you would want for your interest. That is not happening anymore. And this is also a message for those in the country who are willing allies of these NGOs, institutions, and perhaps even governments.
Okay.
We are going to work to ensure that we are self-reliant, Atmanirbhar, as the Prime Minister has called it. We are going to make sure that our energy security, our energy needs are met. We are going to make sure that our security imperative is met. And we are going to ensure that our actions are directed by what is good for India and the interest of Indians, and not by what some institution or government of the West would like us to do.
Okay, let me bring in Sabha Naqvi. You just heard some key phrases in what Mr. Malviya said. Propaganda, funded by hot money, it's sponsored, it's a lobby, plays on divisions, payroll people from Lutyens, Delhi. There are some reports that have appeared recently in the media that link, for example, the USCIRF to anti-India pan-Islamist groups, names that are chairing the USCIRF have been linked to some of these ISI-funded Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan, circumscribed groups, etc., etc. We've got Nadine Maenza, the current USCIRF commissioner, linked to US politician Rick Santorum, an old Pakistan supporter who reportedly wanted the United States to continue foreign aid to Pakistan and maintain good relations with the nuclear-armed country, and Sheikh Ubaid and IMC. So many names are being thrown up in the press, in these news reports. So it's all really a huge attempt to malign the Modi government, to bring down the stable democratic architecture that is propping up India and pushing it towards greatness. How do you respond to this?
So first of all, Rahul, I would say that India was always a superpower in the world. We were a moral superpower, and I hope we remain that. I was fortunate enough in school level, to be in a university because my father was in Princeton, in the US. Everybody talked, India was a moral power. That is our superpower. So we have, unfortunately, I don't think Western governments or any government in the world can tell a country as large as India what to do. But yes, there is a problem right now in certain things which are happening. There is certainly, it's just bad for how we are going to look. And there is a problem and then it needs to be stopped. The problem is not in other people who say this is happening or report this is happening. The problem is in the Dharam Sansad, which suggests that women should be raped, with those who suggest genocide, with people who get out of bail in 10 days. The problem is in the false flag operation that took place in Ayodhya, where people tried to instigate violence. The problem, there is a shakedown. Now, you started off by saying Hindus are becoming like this. I do not think so. I think there is a deliberate attempt by a section to create a lot of unrest. I do not think to generalize that Hindus are like this or Muslims are like that. I would never be party to anything like that. We have in the post-colonial world, India set two great examples. One, we emerged as a genuine democracy, which did not backslide into authoritarianism, dictatorships, and so on and so forth. And we remain an electoral democracy. The problem is with our values of human kinship. Is that not being strained right now? And do we not have to put a stop to it? And even in the language that we use, I'm not going to speak about Hindus and Muslims. I'm going to speak about law and order problems. I'm going to speak about genuine disruptions. I'm going to speak about things like that, which trouble me greatly as a deeply engaged Indian citizen. And they trouble many Indians of all faiths. And to put a color of this political orientation, that's not fair. And I'm not one of those who believe, I think all our battles have to be fought here. But it is a globalized world order, and people are going to comment, just as we do. I'm sure you must have had views on Ukraine and Russia. There is going to be commentary. Okay. When in such a large country, which actually was, we were a moral superpower. Moral superpower. Because of Gandhi, and I don't want us to lose that. I want us to step back. That's all that I can say, Rahul.
Okay, that's all that you can say. Okay, well, now viewers, I'm going to open this up further, bring in Aarti Tikku, Abhas Maldhayar, as well as Sushant Sareen, Arjun Shuran. Let me quickly first address this question about whether, in fact, things have gone to the point where Hindus as a whole, the community as a whole, is being linked to a new hardening, portentous Hinduism. It has been now written about in the mainstream media. So, Aarti Tikku, let me bring these words to your attention. A new Hinduism fashioned into a weapon to intimidate Muslims with the end of driving them out of this country. That's what's now being alleged. And that's why I said that even the perfunctory differentiation that was at least up till now observed between Hindutva and Hinduism, that's also being done away with. All pretenses to any demarcation done away with. If you hear Sabha Naqvi, she said there's a problem. If you hear Mr. Malviya, says it's promoted propaganda. There's no problem, just promoted propaganda. Aarti Tikku, is that something that we can pin all this on? Promoted propaganda?
Rahul, let me first tell your audience that I was the first journalist from India who confronted the West about their media, about the kind of propaganda their media has been doing about India for last several years, even during the Congress rule, even the so-called golden age of India, when India was supposedly the moral power in the world, even then the Western media used to do propaganda about India, used to run a narrative which had no semblance of truth whatsoever. And let me quote you an example. First of all, when I confronted the West in the US congressional hearing on human rights in Kashmir in 2019, many of the people who are now, in India, in Indian mainstream media, were not bothered about this bias and prejudice that the Western media has about India. Because in the last 35 years, if you really see the kind of narrative the Western media ran against India, and this is including the period when we were supposedly a great moral power, they were towing the line of Pakistan on Kashmir. The only issue about Kashmir that was highlighted in the Western media was about human rights violations committed by the Indian state. So for anyone to say that we were great some years ago until Modi government came to power is really bizarre, or has probably not read what the West was saying, what the Western media was saying all along. And let me go even further back in history. If you take the archives of New York Times in the 80s or 90s or even 60s, or take any other Western media platform and see what they've been writing about India, India was never portrayed as a moral power. So I don't know where this illusion came from. Why are we so delusional that, the West was, talking great things about India? No, I haven't. If you really check the archives, there is no evidence whatsoever. Second point, that, that India has become a Hindu fascistic country where Muslims are being targeted and persecuted day in, day out. It is really weird and bizarre, because the same people who are saying this, not even once did they mention that an entire Kashmiri Hindu community was ethnically cleansed, was subjected to genocide in 1990 in Kashmir. At that point of time, were we really a moral power? Who was giving us a pat on our backs for saying that, we actually whitewashed the entire genocide? We did not speak a word about it, and therefore we are something, really great, and we should sing paeans to this country and about our morality. So seriously, there's a serious problem with the moral compass of those people who are saying that we used to be a moral power and we are not anymore. Third thing, this propaganda of the West about Hinduism is again not new. Whenever the BJP has been in power in India, India has been portrayed as a fascistic country. It was even now many people say that Vajpayee was great, liberal, moderate, and Prime Minister Modi is not. But even then, if you look at the kind of propaganda that was coming out of the West, and also some of the mainstream media outlets in India, you will notice that there isn't much difference. At that time, I remember Murli Manohar Joshi's saffronization program was much talked about, and everyone was flogging that horse left, right, center. Today, we are talking about the same issues in a different language. The only difference is this, that for the first time in India's history, perhaps the people who came from the lower strata of society, including me, they found a voice. We are talking openly. We are raising our issues without any fear. We are asking for our rights, and we are essentially saying that there is no shame in being a Hindu. That is the only issue here. There is no other issue. So this is a new thing for this entire class, or you can say the elitist class, which controlled the narrative in India. They are afraid of, because they are afraid that Aarti Tikku might speak the truth. They are afraid that they might have to hear the wrongdoings of this country when their mainstream media was in control of things. So that is the issue. There is no other issue.
There is no other issue. It's the subaltern that you're hearing and you're fearing. That's what Aarti Tikku is suggesting. Abhas Maldhayar, the authors of this narrative seem to suggest that being communal is now the default common sense of civil society. It is as if India has turned into a Hindu Pakistan or a Han China or a Hutu Rwanda. Now, I just want to ask you this question, because would the left ever tolerate any similar generalizations or categorizations of all Muslims as hate mongers in the manner in which it is being done now in the mainstream press?
Yeah, good evening, Rahul.
Good evening.
Absolutely. And that's indeed the reality, that it has all been about the fact that Hindus are asserting, the Indians are really asserting about their rights. Indians are really coming out and calling out the bluff which West have been propagating from long. And yes, I was also hearing about that once upon a time India was seen as at a level of moral compass. But if you really look at the archives and including the literature of the past, like ex-CIA agent like Kaule talking about Lal Bahadur Shastri as being Kaufman's drinker and whatnot. So Indians have always been looked upon with a certain sense of inferiority. It has always been in their literature. Now also, when we start looking into the literature which is really penetrating, including the report which USCIRF has put across. There itself, they start with the idea that it's a Hindu nationalist agenda, which is going to that is negatively affecting Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Dalits. So it is all about stating a fact that somehow Hindus have started troubling the other minorities, but such is not the case. And we see a very eccentric pattern into how the things have been happening. If you very well look into the report which USCIRF has put across, they talk about Father Stan Swami. Then Father Stan Swami, if one looks into the charge sheet filed by NIA, it has put on record the letters which were exchanged between Father Stan Swami and the Communist Party, the Maoist Communist Party. We have seen that how there were discussions that how the messages needs to be encrypted, and we have seen that they are talking about the Dalit Muslim coming together to fight the fascist government. So even we look at the pattern in the language, the fascist government, then we see in the report again we can see they're talking about the persecution of the Muslims in Kashmir, and ironically the person whom they have named, Khurram Parvez, was again caught with the links with the ISI and a taking money from the ISI, and in fact it was also established that he had got a very close relationship with Gautam Navlakha. And then we also find that then further in the report we see there have been talk about the CAA protest. They are talking that through the CAA, somehow the Muslims are being persecuted, somehow we'll see the persecution. Muslims will be really stripped of the citizenship. Again, the fact remains that none of the Muslims have lost the citizenship, neither any further persecution began to increase. The fact of the matter being that CAA was for the people who were being persecuted.
So you're saying that the facts are not adding up. The USIRC. Yeah, I'm coming to you. There's also
He's saying that the guys in America are so gullible that they didn't believe the NIA and the police version of events. Intellectually, that's what he's saying. A charge sheet from everybody, they were all guilty. But those guys in America are so gullible that they dug this. But carry on. It's very entertaining. Please go on to the next speaker.
But one thing I must say.
I'm being sarcastic. In case nobody got it, I'm being very sarcastic.
I know.
He's reading out police versions of cases saying, no, but NIA said this and this. But carry on, please.
Okay, one second.
Quite amusing to watch this.
Okay, on the on the USCIRF report and its criticism of... One second, Arjunji, one second. I'll come to you. I also have Sushant Sareen. Everybody here has spoken at length. I'm not going to...
From the report, he is misquoting. I have the report before me. And he is misquoting from the report.
Arjun, you'll get your time. Mr. Shuran, you'll get your time. Please, just give me 30 seconds. I'm coming to everybody. Let's not make this a usual shout fest. Let's not do that. Everyone has spoken calmly. No one has interrupted anybody. Let's have Look, no one is being censored here. I assure you. Now, I just want to say, on the USCIRF report and its previous critiques of the CA, I don't know, viewers, if you know this, but there is a whole group of amendments and legislation that the United States government passed. The Lautenberg-Specter amendments. Now, what are these? These create the same categories of individuals that the United States wants to give refuge to. In fact, the Specter amendments, in the context of Iran, now please pay attention, in the context of Iran, very specifically, viewers, which is an Islamic state, allowed for Jews and other minorities from there to come and live in the United States, take citizenship of the United States. So special criteria was very much the same as the CA. And the USCIRF at that time praised that particular amendment. There was no talk about this being a specifically anti-Muslim, denying Muslims citizenship by America. I'm just talking about one example, and since we are getting into whether we are misquoting or not, I'm just talking about facts. Forget about the NIA here, just the facts on very legal, solid grounds. Why would the USCIRF support the Spectre Amendment and have a problem with the CA when the same aim is thought to be achieved? So this is something that needs to be asked. Now, whether this is all paid, whether it's all part of some larger, anti-India narrative, that we can keep debating. Let me bring in Sushant Sareen on this. Sushant Sareen and Arjun Shuran will go head to head now. Sushant Sareen, why is this talk about this being a paid narrative, these linkages coming out? Now, you have been somebody who has looked deeply into national security issues. Is there a real problem here, or is it all imagined?
I think a lot of it is imagined. There are problems. Look, Rahul, to deny that there are social tensions in India is to deny the obvious. But are these social tensions recent? At the time when we were a moral superpower, there used to be a very, very big riot every year. When we were apparently a moral superpower, and we were also a secular country, which we are not apparently now. There used to be, and you want me to count the riots? I can start back from 69 in Ahmedabad and go up to Bhagalpur in 1989. And I think we were still a moral superpower. Is that right? So I think that's a load of bunkum. And I agree with Aarti and the other gentleman, who debunked that argument of a moral superpower and the contempt with which the Western media has always treated us. Secondly, I think what you have to understand is that what has happened in India is partly, the Western media narrative is, as Stephen Harper, the former Prime Minister of Canada, said recently at the Raisina Dialogue, a lot of that narrative is a proxy for the kind of ideological conflicts which are happening in the Western society. So they take an aim at India, but the actual target is, their own conservative element within their own country. But the third thing is that there is a section of population in India, or a section of the elite, which is now cut off from the power sectors. And they are feeling left out. And what they need is intervention from outside. They seek it, they crave it, and they become an echo chamber for many of these Western journalists who don't know their backside from their front when it comes to India. Most of them are utterly illiterate about India. And their echo chamber is this lot of people who actually feed them with this kind of a very fake kind of a narrative. And what happens is, are bad things not happening in India? Of course they're happening. But is this the only time they've started happening? They used to happen in the past. The only thing is that now they are being amplified out of proportion. They are being telescoped into, and only from a certain angle. The prism is a very, very different kind of a prism. It's not something that you are looking at any issue holistically. You are looking at it from a particularly tainted lens. So, for example, you have a big Indian newspaper, one of the national dailies, which comes out with a headline that violence breaks out after stone pelting on a Hindu procession. The stone pelting was not violence. What happened after the stone pelting was violence. Now, if anybody who understands English language, the nuances of English language will tell you how these headlines and how these kind of news stories are written by the usual suspects to convey a certain impression. To my mind, the moment stone pelting happened, violence, that was an extremely violent act. But there is this section of people who thinks that stone pelting is a peaceful protest. We've seen that in Kashmir, and Aarti will bear me out on that, that in Kashmir, stone pelters were always supposed to be peaceful. Forget about it that people were getting maimed, people were getting killed, people were getting very badly injured, but that was supposed to be a peaceful protest. And that is the kind of narrative which feeds into this liberal, Western, woke kind of a crowd, and then creates this narrative. But one more thing, Rahul. Let's talk about this Hindu assertion, for want of a better phrase, in India. Why don't we talk about the Bible Belt in the US? Why don't we talk about the fact that the Americans, despite being a proclaimed secular state, insist on protecting Christianity? No eyebrows are raised when the American president takes an oath of office on his Bible. But suddenly people get all agitated and, they get their knickers in a twist the moment you have somebody, take an oath on the Gita in India. Or for that matter, the Quran in India. Or for that matter, any other holy book in India. And then you start looking at Indians as though, pata nahi ye kaun se log hai, where these guys have come from. Let's talk about the European societies. You mean to tell me that there is no ethnic or sectarian differences in European societies? I can give you many instances where people have not gone to funerals of people from another denomination simply because their own church and their own community would not take it properly, would take it amiss. And then these people have the temerity to point fingers at us. So, listen, I think there are problems in all societies. And we need to fix some of those problems. But the fact of the matter that the kind of disproportionate focus which is being given onto India, that this is a democracy going, completely out of sync, this is a democracy turning into dictatorship, is a load of nonsense. And let me just give you one instance of that, Rahul. During the course of this program, you mentioned somewhere that, there is a lot of talk about how Muslims are being intimidated and how Muslims are being pushed out of this country. Please give me any instance where Muslims have been pushed out of India. Please tell me that. And I'm not talking about illegal immigrants coming from Bangladesh. Damn it, even they have not been pushed out of India. But please tell me whether there has been an exodus of any minority community from India. Unlike the countries which have been named under the CAA, Bangladesh, 20% Hindu population has been reduced to 8%. Pakistan has been reduced to under 2%. Okay, Afghanistan, there are no minorities left. And yet people say that the people who are the perpetrators of violence against minorities should be put on the same pedestal and treated similarly as the people who are perpetrating those atrocities on those minorities. What kind of craziness is this? And finally, you talk about the intimidation of how Muslims are being intimidated. Let's talk about West Bengal. We all keep talking about Modi, Modi, Modi. Forget Modi, yaar. Let's talk about Mamata for a change. Let's talk about the kind of pogroms which have happened in West Bengal over the last 6 months. Why don't the so-called liberal, secular elite even mention that? And one last word, Rahul. These foggy old bureaucrats who keep writing letters because that's all they can do. Let's talk about their track record when they were in service. These very people presided over some of the worst writing that this country has seen under the so-called secular government. And their moral compass never shook at that point of time. Suddenly, because they are being denied post-retirement jobs, they are being denied all those privileges which used to come. And there were journalists in this country who are suddenly out in the cold because they used to get these very fat contracts from Doordarshan and what have you to make programs which nobody used to watch. The kind of enrichment which was happening to Lutyens Delhi has stopped. So as a result, there is a natural kind of an angst which is coming out. And finally, Rahul, just one last word. Social media has given a lot of voice to people. Many of those voices are unrestrained. But if every time you take an unrestrained voice which comes out, and I'm not defending any of those, but you want to take one side of the story, but not the other side of the story. You don't want to talk about what the Raza Academy does or any of the PFI or any of these other hate mongers do, but only talk about those stupid Dharam Sansad fellows who mouth those kind of absolute ridiculous stuff. Then it shows your prejudice and your bias and nothing more than that. So if you want to talk about, how this country needs to be taken forward, please evaluate everybody from the same stick, have the same parameters for judging everybody.
Okay.
Don't say that because somebody else is from a so-called minority community, I'm going to give that person a pass, but somebody else who mouths the same kind of stupidities, I'm going to make it into a focal issue and I'm going to agitate over that issue.
Okay.
Please evaluate both those people with the same yardstick.
Selectivity is Mr. Sareen's...
Please don't indulge in selective secularism.
Okay.
Either you are secular or you are not secular.
Okay. Arjun Shuran, selective secularism is to blame. That's what Mr. Sareen is saying. Stop that. Stop that.
So when my friends make all these points, it's very strange. I don't know why they don't read the reports itself. You look at the report; it's a bipartisan effort. The commissioners include people who are Hindu. Ms. Bhargav is part of the commissioner panel. And look at the charges. All that the USCIRF report says is that you have misused UAPA. You have pushed, the government is pushing for a Hindu nationalist agenda, which I'm sure none of these people are agreeing with. All of them, there is a difference between Hinduism and Hindutva. The word Hinduism is not even used in this report. They're just saying there is a Hindu nationalist agenda that is being pushed forth. Further, it is saying that on the basis of anti-conversion laws, on the basis of certain things such as the hijab controversy, people of the minorities are being targeted. Is that not true? Is that not true that after a huge protest across the country, it is that the CA and NRC was stopped and there was a genuine display of anger and protest against it, which shows that the minority was concerned about it. You may agree or disagree with it. Is it not true that all organizations, especially organizations which were working on different religious freedoms, their FCRA was banned, their funding was stopped? Only the RSS and its Hindu Rashtra bodies and organizations get funding. So all these things are happening. You look at the report, and unfortunately, my friends who spoke before me, either they have not read the report, and one of our friends who read the report, he's clearly misquoting the report. It is easy to do whataboutery. What about Kashmiri Pandits? What about Lal Bahadur Shastri, that era, this era, Congress era? I am living in 2022. All I want is a secular nation which follows rule of law. And even if someone from Timbuktu tells my nation that, these are things you can improve upon, to improve your nation's quality of life, to improve the quality of citizens, to improve the rule of law here, to ensure that the constitution and its ideals are protected. What's so wrong with it? They have used the most moderate language. They say it's a country of concern, and this report does not target India. There are multiple countries across the world, including China, Pakistan, etc. And they have also made a distinction between different countries. They've counted the number of incidents. I believe it's a very fair report, and the government, instead of ridiculing it as propaganda, etc., must give it some serious thought. Maybe they are right. Maybe 1% of what they're saying is right. Don't think every criticism is not an attack on this country. Let's take it maturely. We are a maturing democracy. We are getting there, but mistakes can be made in governance, and we know there is a certain agenda of the current ruling government. Let's not run away from that. It is not a personal attack on Mr. Modi. It's not a personal attack on anyone, but we have an opportunity of making things better for the worst of the worst in this country, for the minorities of this country. We have to ensure everyone feels protected. And those of you who don't go out, Lutyens Delhi or Delhi or wherever you are sitting, please go out and talk to the minorities. They will tell you the fear and alienation they are fearing. This report talks of UAPA. I am saying even under the the mask laws under COVID or 144, the local thanedar picks up people in Haryana. This is happening. Karnataka, this is happening. Many states, this is happening. There is a problem where religious minorities, linguistic minorities, all sorts of minorities in this country, the Dalits of this country are being targeted. Let's maturely deal with this with all sensitivity it demands. Let's not engage in whataboutery.
Okay, so whataboutery. Now, USCIRF report, we must take as the gospel truth, says Arjun Shuran. Now, let me ask a couple of
Say that again, you're misquoting. I'm not saying. I'm saying please look at it as a genuine effort.
Genuine effort.
Country.
If it is a genuine effort.
If Rahul, if you and I had been awarded by the US Senate or the US House of Representatives, we would have thought of it as a great honor. Any politician in this country,
I certainly won't.
It's a great honor. But certainly today we're facing some criticism. We say it's a bad thing.
1 second,
That's
sir.
not how it works.
Just 1 second, sir. Don't speak for me. Please don't speak for me. I wouldn't even want a state honor. Please. I mean, can you imagine a journalist accepting a state honor, a Padma Shri? I would jump if a government gave me a Padma Shri and I accepted it. Can you imagine? That would be the end of that would be the end of my career. But there are journalists who have done that, viewers, and they pontificate about, objectivity. Now, hang on, 1 minute. Okay, let's see.
You have 4 panelists who are of one view. I just want to make one remark after Arjun has spoken up. Now, I'll make 2. What I find very tragic because is to say, okay, so most of you think India was never a moral power, so what is happening now is okay. Fair enough. I'm just trying to sum up what I've heard. It's been very intellectually interesting. And a lot of it is about resentment. It's not positive thinking, resentment. You did this, Muslims, minorities, this lobby, that lobby. Come on, guys, think in a positive way. We're all Indians, we're all together. Cut out these little dog whistling resentment. And then if you position yourself as intellectual voices, you sound really pathetic then. Nobody then, you will not be taken seriously. You will just be on this kind of talking to each other and saying, we have historical resentment. Hindu ka waqt aa gaya. You say, it's really sad, yeah?
No one said Hindu ka waqt aa gaya.
No, one of them did. One of them did.
They said Hindus are just
she said it
speaking...
in English. She said in English, subaltern.
Okay.
A subaltern ka waqt aa gaya. I am a subaltern. Anyway, I don't want to get personal.
Okay,
the thing is, Arjun has the right attitude. And since we are outnumbered here, let me say, I feel sorry for people who walk around with so many resentments here.
Okay. So
mature. I don't have it. You're all my friends.
Let's go back to the facts.
Hope you all prosper.
Let's look at it more specifically. And let's go into another fact of this USCIRF report. You're talking about religious freedoms. Constricting religious freedoms, the state strangling people's religious freedoms. Hindus, viewers, in this country have been strangled. Why? Because their places of worship have been denied to them. Is this not an attack on their religious freedoms? They are not allowed to manage their places of worship, viewers. They are not trusted by the state to do so. This doesn't find any mention. The long-standing pogrom against Hindus in Kashmir, the targeted killings that are going on there, no mention of that. None at all. They're going on, viewers, even as we speak. For all the promises of giving Kashmir huge security, etc., Hindus are being pulled out and shot in their shops. Not one mention. Why? Because maybe Islamist fundamentalists, terrorists sponsored by Pakistan are responsible, and that brings you to the point, why are Hindus being killed specifically in a Muslim majority area of India? No one will ask this question. No one will go into it. Arjun Shuran finds that reasonable. It's okay. I don't. I have a right to differ from you. We all have a right to differ. We are all mature. Yes, Mr. Malviya, quick response to Arjun Shuran and Mr. Sareen. Yes. And Arti Tikku, who has been called somebody who has tried to speak up for Hindu assertion and said that let's not be what have you. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, Mr. Malviya.
There is a constant attempt by a section of commentators in our country where they expect the majority to cede the public space, and they are perfectly fine if there's overt, aggressive display of religiosity by the minority. Of course, if that is going to be the case, and if you're going to cover it under the garb of secularism and grin and bear it, you will find what Sabha called as morally being superpower. But if you're going to be realistic about giving everybody a fair chance and getting treated equally by the state, then you cannot have a situation where the minority community asserts itself beyond what is largely expected in a civilized society. Now, the recent spate of stone pelting that has happened in this country was not something that the majority community did. It was the Muslims who came out and pelted stones on the Ramanavami and Hanuman.
All of that is under investigation. So, I mean...
But let me make my point, Rahul. Let me make my point.
Yeah.
And this is not something that has happened only in this year. It is something that's been happening for decades. And people like Ambedkar have written about it. And let's not forget that India was divided on religious lines because the Muslims believed that they cannot live in a Hindu majority. So those who thought that they could not live under a Hindu majority chose to go to Pakistan and what is now Bangladesh. But those who have stayed back, they must at least make an attempt to assimilate. And if they cannot assimilate, they must be tolerant of other faiths. If that is not going to happen, and there is going to be a response to their aggressiveness, and if somebody sitting in the United States is trying to lecture us on morally, I would tell them to look at the racial crimes that happen in America. The big movement around Black Lives Matter is a shame. And has any institution in America denounced it and beaten themselves black and blue? I'm sure they haven't. Because they want to put the gaze on the rest of the world where they believe that they can assert themselves and
so double standards, hypocrisy.
But India is not going to be a subservient nation anymore.
Double standards.
And it's bad news for people who want to believe that the attempt made by these institutions is either naive or is something that must be given an opportunity. I don't want to be told. We have our courts, we have our polity, we have elections, we have functioning democracy, we have equal rights.
Okay, I'm going to go over time. I get the point. We get the point. Yes, Mr. Sareen. And lastly, since you were picked upon, I will come to you last, Aarti Tikku. Yes, Sushant Sareen. I don't have much time, please.
So Rahul, quickly, 3 points. Number one, the moment somebody uses the word whataboutery, they're basically trying to say that, look, yes, we are hypocrites, but don't point out our hypocrisy. Because, that's the only reason to use this word whataboutery, because it is important to point out the hypocrisy which comes out so apparently in many of the arguments which are made. And the moment you point it out, the other side's only pushback is don't indulge in whataboutery. Second point, to say that the current government is pushing a Hindu nationalist agenda. Please tell me what exactly is the Hindu nationalist agenda, because I don't know what it is. I have asked many of these characters, including people who talk about a Hindu Rashtra. I said, do you have any framework? What exactly is a Hindu Rashtra? Have you got some kind of a constitutional framework? You have nothing. So these are basically slogans which are being used. Please tell me what exactly is the Hindu nationalist agenda. Please define it in 10 points. What exactly
larger,
it is.
Larger question.
And how is it any different
that's another debate. We'll come to that debate. I get what you're saying. A lot of whataboutery, etc. Aarti Tikku, 30, 40 seconds, please. I don't have more time. I'm really over.
I have to make only 2 points. One is Miss Naqvi has so much contempt for the subaltern or perhaps the unwashed masses of India because the poor actually are not entitled to tell their truth. They're not entitled to speak their opinion. Therefore, we're not supposed to be taken seriously. So that's essentially the crux of her argument. Second, it's really unfortunate that Arjun basically said that whatever happened to me, whatever happened to my life, my childhood, my adulthood, it's something that happened. Now let's move on and let's talk about something else. Because USCIRF is the holy book, is the biblical truth that we must all bow before. We must actually acknowledge what they are saying, but we shouldn't talk about the truth that I experienced. That we shouldn't be talking about the discrimination, the persecution that I faced in this country. So it's a shame that we have these intellectuals justifying one wrong and then asking us to actually acknowledge that everything that is happening right now is wrong and it's persecution and discrimination against Muslims.
Well,
both
look.
Hindus and Muslims, whosoever has been persecuted and who has faced discrimination against, we need to talk about them. It can't be selective.
Viewers, this is a long debate. We've had a very intense, long debate. I don't think anyone has been cut short. And for that, at least, we must be thankful to all the participants. You can take away whatever you want, viewers, from whoever you think is making sense. But I feel, once again, and I have to say this, that we must rise above the daily, constant cycle of recrimination and take a longer view. I'm sorry if it sounds like one of those pious homilies, empty, but it is true. Take a deep breath. I leave it at this.